I'm Jeanette Keynes from Jewelry Arts Inc. And I'm going to show you the easiest way to solder a bezel to a shank straight. And I'm going to also show you some tricks for getting that damn third arm to behave itself. So one of the biggest problems with doing things like this is getting it straight. So what I did was I took a ruler, drew straight line, because that way your eye has something straight to look at, which helps enormously. Now I'm going to be showing you soldering together a gold bezel and a 20 karat gold shank, but the procedure that I'm going to go through for this is absolutely identical as it is in silver. We would just be using silver, either hard or medium solder, depending on what else we have here. In this case, I'm going to be using 20 karat soft. So the first thing I do, get my bezel on here and line it up nice and straight. So the next step is I have to get the third arm to hold my ring shank in place right where I want it on here. Now, if you guys have used a third arm before, these can be pretty fiddly to position. So let me show you a little technique that I use that I do think helps a bit. I mean, one thing you always want to remember is set up your third arm as far away from where you're going to be heating as possible. Because if this is too close to your seam, it can act like a heat sink. You know, it can kind of draw your heat into it rather into your metal, which is not what you want. So the first thing I do before I try to position it on here is get it positioned nice and flat right up against my block. And I'm going to get up and I'm going to check this from the side and make sure that it's not at an angle, you know, that it's straight up and down. Because it's much easier to get it to this state and then pick it up, place it on top of your bezel or whatever it is you're soldering together, than to just pick this up and try to arrange everything in place. It's a little more frustrating for sure. Now, when I look from the side, actually that shank looks a little bit twisted, and that's why you can never trust just looking from the front. Everything looks great from the front, but when you get up and look from the side, it could be like a whole different situation happening. Okay, so that looks straight now. So I'm going to just pick it up and put it into place on my bezel. Take a moment here and look at my bezel from above and try to make sure that it's aligned. Basically, the more things I have straight, the better off I'll be. Okay, so I'm just going to pick it up, place it on top of here, where I believe the middle to be. Then I'm going to check from the top, I'm going to check from the side, and make sure everything's the way I want it to be. But I find that getting it flat and straight up and down on the block and then picking it up and putting it in place is way faster and easier than any other method I've tried. And when I look down from the top, I can use the line that's there to make sure that the shank is beautiful and aligned. Is way easier than any other way I know. So that looks pretty good. So I'm going to start placing my solder. I've got some 20 karat soft right over here that I balled up already, like so. So normally I just dip it in a little bit of paste flux, put it right where I want it, which is right in the front there. And when you want solder to fill an area or flow towards something, you gotta make sure there's flux on the other side too. Do you know what I mean? Because the solder's only gonna wanna go where the flux is. So just make sure when you do something like this, that you add a little flux from the other side as well. And you'll notice I used a little ball because the balls definitely tend to leave less of a scar. And actually, I think I'm going to replace that with two smaller ones. It's actually a little big. So I'm going to dry it a little bit, and then I'm just going to get it good and hot, and just by making the contact right there, it'll suck through. And I always have my tweezers ready because whenever you heat up flux, it always hops around, and then the solder hops around, like so. And basically I need the shank and the bezel to get hot. See? Beautiful. So basically I have to check that it flowed all the way through and filled in. If we need to add a little more, then I will. Yeah, I think I'm gonna show you a little close up so you can see why, but yeah, I'm gonna add a little bit more. However, I'm gonna add it from the exact same spot. I wanna do minimal cleanup, which is always my mission in life. So if I keep adding it from the same spot, I only have one tiny little spot to clean up. And also I'll show you how clean this is right here from using the little solder balls. So you can see the solder flowed beautifully, but I need a little bit more over here to fill that in well. You know, I want that filled in all the way. And then I'll flip it over and show you the other side. So you see how the solder hasn't traveled all the way through to the other side. So I'm gonna add a little bit more. So you see that tiny, tiny little solder mark there? That's gonna be very easy to clean up. So I'm gonna set up in exactly the same spot and add a little bit more solder. So I'm gonna add, I guess, 2 more pieces, and we'll see what that gets us. But essentially with stuff like this, you just keep adding solder until it's filled all the way from one side to the other. There we go. I'll show you a close-up, but that filled in beautifully. So of course there's a bunch of flux there, so you may not be able to see it super well. I'll also show it to you after it's been pickled, but look to me like it filled in pretty nicely. And that's the other side. So like I said, it looks to me like it's filled in. I'm gonna pickle it and I'll show you guys what it looks like. I think I'm done, but we'll see. So this looks pretty good, but there's a little area over on the right-hand side. Boop, like right in there that I'd like that to fill in just a tiny bit more. So I'm gonna add another piece or two, but otherwise it looks pretty good. So even though I don't really think this shank is gonna go anywhere, I still put the third arm again, just in case. I mean, this has a pretty good flat on it, and like I said, I don't really expect it to move, but just in case. Okay, so I'm going to put a nice big piece right here. There we go. Yeah, that filled in nicely. I'll show you the close-up. So you see what that looks like now? All beautiful and filled in. So I'll throw it in the pickle, of course, and give it a last look, but that looks good. And just to show you, this is what it looks like from the other side. And this side will require 0 cleanup because I didn't add any solder from this side. So that's one less side that I've got to deal with. So there it is, all cleaned up, and you see how it's all filled in, all beauteous. And I won't have a whole lot of cleanup to do, but I'll spiff it up a little bit. And you know, that's really the key when you're doing stuff like this. You know, you just keep adding the solder until the seam is filled in. And because I use paste flux, I can usually get away with doing, you know, multiple rounds without necessarily soldering in between each time. It just depends how dirty it gets and, you know, how much your metal oxidizes. If you're using a really, you know, like an alloy with a lot of copper in it, it might get, you know, too black to go on and you'll have to stop and pickle. But if I can push the envelope a little bit, I definitely do. So there it is, all cleaned up and whatnot. So pretty much ready to set at this point.